Hi there. Hello. I woke up this beautiful, very hot, sweltering, scorching July 6th morning, 98 degrees, and I was consumed by a longing. It has been several months since I ended the never ending reading vlog, and I'm not announcing its return, but I am starting a new book today, and I want to do a reading vlog for it. Dungeon Crawler Carl, Book 4, The Gate of the Feral Gods. Everyone on BookTube's reading Dungeon Crawler Carl, and FOMO, I could not miss out. And I've been loving the series, especially if you've been watching my recent videos. Several Dungeon Crawler Carl things, long form, short form, what have you. So I'm going to document my reading experience from this point forward, even though my OCD is burning right now. I regret not vlogging the previous 3 installments. There's no day like today. We are vlogging for the rest of this lit RPG masterpiece of an experience authored by Matt Dinniman, narrated by Jeff Hayes in the audiobook version. I think it's going to be fun. There's going to be spoilers. We're going to talk about the previous books. We're going to talk about what's happening currently in the book that I am starting today. It's about 580 pages. I think it'll take me about a week tops. Who knows? But I'm excited to be doing reading vlogs again. And I see several other booktubers vlogging their experience through this series, and I'm copying them, people like Murphy and others, because I have no original ideas in my brain. So, if you haven't read these books, you're going to want to stop watching now. But for those of you who have read this series, or who are currently reading book 4, welcome to the reading vlog. So, I've been reading book 4 for a few hours now. And initial thoughts, I'm liking it. I'm liking where the story is going. Where did we leave off of book 3? Well, Carl, Donut, and Katya had just dispatched one of the most powerful, popular crawlers in the game. And that scene was amazing. Absolutely bonkers. Surprised me. Book 3 is the only book so far in Dungeon Crawler Carl that has surprised me. And I'm expecting to be surprised with the Gate of the Feral Gods. Katya. I have mixed feelings about Katya. I really preferred when it was just Carl and Donut, this dynamic duo that was navigating through the crawl together. I love the camaraderie. I love their dynamic. I love the dialogue. Katya, at first I hated her. I was convinced she was just going to be killed off, so that way she could be character development for Carl. But that has not been the case. She is arguably the most powerful person in their group. She's a shapeshifter that can transform into anything she can imagine. And that's interesting, but it's overpowered, and I suspect it's going to get quite boring unless things change. Because Carl, he solves problems. He builds machines. He creates weapons and bombs. He's creative. His creativity is what has gotten him through the crawl so far. So having a teammate that could transform into anything, it's a little boring. It makes a lot of the conflicts and puzzles a little too easy for Carl to solve. Like, for example, Katya is now, with the chapter I just read, able to transform into an all-terrain vehicle, like a transformer, and she's able to, take Carl and Donut to great distances very quickly. That's just not fair. That's not cool. That's boring. I suspect the system AI, the all-powerful system AI that makes sure the dungeon is fair, is going to nerf Katya. That's what I'm expecting. That's what I'm predicting. So, next day, I finished chapter 4, Lucia Marr. Terrifying crawler. I see why she's been in first place for almost the entirety of the series up to this point. She was a young girl, like less than 10, and she's the number 1 crawler in the dungeon, and everyone is terrified of her. Half the day she's a beautiful grown woman, the other half of the day she's a monster, and she is out of her mind. She might need mental help, and she just killed off another one of the top 10. She tricked Florin, who's like this crocodile shotgun vanguard person who has like a shotgun of unlimited ammo, and he has like this romantic subplot with Afechi. And up until this point, I thought Afechi was a dude. I'm pretty sure when Carl mentions Afechi in the first book, they don't have a name, and they're a part of this group of African people with some submachine guns, and they're just mowing through the first few levels of the crawl. And they're just killing the dungeon. They're making easy work of it, and they get later on to the dungeon, and Afechi's the last survivor. We think they're a dude. They end up connected to Florin, the shotgun crocodile guy, and they bump into Lucia Marr, and she causes a conflict, and she tricks Florin into killing Ifechi, and perhaps there was a romantic subplot. And it was heavy stuff. It was thought-provoking stuff. And it's also a really good thing for the story, because you constantly see all these other crawlers in the dungeon mentioned. And you hear Carl think and ponder, I hope I don't have to bump into that person. I wonder what's going to... And then the reader's thinking, what's going to happen when Carl meets this crocodile dude? What's going to happen when Carl has to fight the Miriam, the goat lady? She's like a shepherd. Or what's he going to do when he has to fight Lucia Marr? And then sometimes these characters get killed off. And it keeps the stakes high. And it keeps the story slightly unpredictable. All I know about this series is that Carl either has to win, he has to complete all the levels of the dungeon, and he wins his freedom. Or he dies, and we're just reading Carl's memoirs in the Dungeon Anarchist cookbook. And that's what I'm kind of pulling for. That's what I think would be the most interesting way to end the series, is Carl's dead. And we're just reading the Dungeon Anarchist cookbook. That would be very interesting. Or Carl's going to find a way to escape the dungeon and cause a revolution. Like, think Hunger Games. And that's the only three ways I could see this series ending. But it's just so cool to see Carl think about and strategize about what he's going to do when he meets these other powerful crawlers. And then they're just killed off. And it's so real. And I'm not sure what the purpose of having all these subplots that don't really come to fruition in the story. But it does just show the reader how evil the Crawl is. How much it takes advantage of people. How it just coerces people, destroys their culture, destroys their world, and then forces them to turn against each other. And just how dehumanizing it all is, and how evil it all is. So every time you read Carl, you read the passages where Carl says, "You will not break me." It just hits heavy. And it hits heavier every time Carl says it. And I'm loving seeing Carl grow into this avenging character. How he wants to defend humanity. How he wants to prove the people in charge of the Crawl wrong. It's really epic stuff. Tuesday morning. I just got to chapter 7. Carl and Donut and some of the weaker crawlers have gone on a mission to the town square of these camel people where the story has been taking place at this point. They are infiltrating and trying to figure out what they have in their sanctuary. What they're having that they use as collateral that stops these gnomes who live in the air from bombing them and destroying the town. So Carl and Donut and two of these other crawlers, these losers that hang out at the brothel, they break in, they find the collateral. It's this gnome that has this spell that could bring back this dead god to life, like a necromancer spell. And then they're about to get to this gnome. They're about to save him. They're about to talk to him. And these other crawlers from the other level, because this dome that they're in has 4 separate areas, like under the ground, the air, earth, water, kind of like an Avatar 4 elements thing. And they're about to talk to this gnome. And this gnome tricks the crawlers from the other area to kill him. So now Carl and Donut have infiltrated this very dangerous place for no reason. And they've destroyed the building. That's not good. That's the collateral. What are the gnomes going to do now? So that's where I think the plot is going. I think we're about to have an altercation with the gnomes, and that's always exciting. The gnomes that, drive planes and hot air balloons, and they drop out of the sky and they bomb people. Pretty dangerous. And I love how there's 4 levels in this book. In this particular level in the Crawl, and you can't leave to the other sections until you beat your boss. So all these crawlers in the level, they're in communication, but they can't really work together yet. So I'm pretty sure the last half of the book's going to be a lot more interesting, a lot more inter-crawler dynamics, and I love that part. That was one of my favorite parts of book 3. But yeah, I can't wait for Carl and Donut to take the castle, so we can see what these other levels look like. I want to see what the tunnels look like. I want to see what the water looks like. I want some more world building. One of my favorite parts about Dungeon Crawler Carl is that every book has at least 1, perhaps even 2, world building experiences, because every level is completely different. They make allusions to different video games throughout history, and that's kind of exciting.
A potato? Carl got an intergalactic yam as his present from the new sponsor's box. I'm very interested to see where this is going.
So, Chris is alive. Chris and Brandon were a pair of brothers from Meadowlark, so they were part of the group of people that was the retirement home, along with Imani and Ellie. Brandon passed away in the previous installment, and I remember that passage from the Dungeon Anarchist cookbook where Carl receives a message, and it says, from a deceased crawler, and Brandon basically talks about how he's about to die, and that he's about to sacrifice himself so that way Meadowlark can survive, and they could escape, and he regrets that him and Chris had a falling out. He says, I wish I would have told Chris how much I loved him. And those are his final words to Carl. So Carl has just been alerted that Chris is alive, but Chris is different. He's like a stone golem person, and when he changed his class and race on level 3, his personality started to change, and they're not quite sure why. So that makes me happy, because I was saying yesterday how one of the interesting things about this series that keeps you on your toes is that characters will be killed off screen, but not Chris. Not Chris from Meadowlark. And I can't wait to see how that interaction goes. I'm still pondering about the potato, and I'm starting to see how applicable the other upgrade is from Carl's previous sponsor. They gave him like this implant that allows him to tell the elevation and speed of things, and he's in an air level where he's going to have to attack an island, like an island in the sky that is a fortress. So that's going to come in handy. So Chris is alive. The water quadrant has been, freed. So now they have to just do the tunnel, the air, and the earth, I think. Or something like that. It's a little hard to follow because Carl's only been inhabiting one of the quadrants, but it's all going to come together. But I can't wait to see how the Chris interaction goes.
Thursday morning. I'm just about to the halfway point of the book. I've covered a lot of ground. Right now, I'm about to read the part where Carl and Donut are going into an interview with this company that made a donut toy. Donut got her merch, and it's exciting. She's ecstatic. The merchandise, the little toy donut, is not super durable. It's kind of a piece of junk. It's very creepy. It says these scary, creepy, possessed doll type things. It uses plagiarized Garfield lines. It's quite comical. But a lot has happened up to that point. I covered a lot of ground, so let me fill you guys in. Carl and Donut, they reanimate the gnome that was held underneath the camel city that was destroyed by the other crawlers. They reanimate its body, and they trick the gnomes that are giving back the collateral, and they're paying for passage to the gnomish castle. And then they, defeat the gnomes. They blow up the castle, and Donut, Carl, they crash land onto the earth, and they survive, and it's very scary. And then Carl, he pisses off the system AI. So one thing that has allowed Carl to survive so long in the dungeon, especially in the first book where he had no idea what was happening, the system AI took a liking to Carl. But why did the system AI favor Carl? Well, it liked his feet. Carl was barefoot in his boxers when he entered the dungeon, and the AI has a bit of a foot fetish. Okay, and that's why Carl always gets these magical items, these buffs, these abilities that pertain to his feet. So the gnomes, one of their weapons is they shoot gerbils at you. They shoot these like flesh-eating gerbils out of a gun at you, and Carl keeps dodging them. And the system AI is acting very hostile. And they're like, "Yo, what's up with the system AI?" Well, system AI, it's been feeling a little teased. It really wanted Carl to smush some gerbils with his feet, which is gross. But not to kink shame, but still gross. Carl's like, "There's no way I'm going to give in to your creepy desires." And the system AI sends a plague of gerbils to attack Humptown, and they barely survive it. In the aftermath of this massive gerbil plague, Carl bumps into Chris. Chris from Meadowlark, and it's a little tense. It's a little awkward. I don't remember too much of Chris's dialogue from the first installment of the series, but I don't remember it being this awkward, this tense. And everyone is telling Carl, dude, watch out, watch out, Chris isn't himself. And Carl's like, what do you mean? Meanwhile, Carl's looking at his interface and he sees that more and more people are watching his stream. And he starts to think, why is that? Is Chris about to attack me? There must be something I don't know. So then they find out that it's not really Chris. It is Chris's body, but he's been possessed by Maggie. Maggie is the antagonist that Carl encounters in the first book. I believe they have some interactions in the second book, and Carl talks to her partner in the third book, or maybe her fiance. I don't remember exactly his relationship to Maggie. But Maggie has possessed Chris, and she's a very powerful crawler, and that explains why Chris's personality has changed so much. It explains why he's been acting so erratically. It explains why he's wanted to hook up with Carl for so bad. It all makes sense. Carl escapes this encounter because Katya comes and saves him and paralyzes Chris with these darts. But Carl is now faced with a dilemma. Does he listen to Chris, who is sending him messages and telling him to kill me? Put me out of my misery. Maggie's using my body to kill all these other crawlers. I don't want to be used this way. Just put me out of my misery and kill me. But you see, Carl, he struggles with that. He has not killed a crawler yet. He is a champion for humanity. He does not want the dungeon, the crawl to change him. But if he lets Chris, Maggie, the conglomerate, this duo, go free, they may hurt Carl. They may hurt Donut. They may hurt those they love. So Carl is conflicted. But he makes the right decision, the utilitarian decision, to kill Chris. And as he's about to do it, Donut swoops in, uses her whole spell, saves Chris, and stops Carl from having to make that decision. And she tells Carl, you can't even kill these NPCs. I can't let you kill one of your friends. You would never recover. And I think Donut was right. So Carl is relieved, but he's also afraid and frustrated and embarrassed and conflicted. And that's one of the best parts about Carl as a protagonist. He's not the most intelligent. He's not like this big paragon of virtue. He's very human. He's very conflicted. He wants to do the right thing, but sometimes he makes the wrong decision. Sometimes Donut does things that go over his head, and he doesn't make the right decision for the whole. And he makes mistakes, and he's very human. He's very relatable. And watching him try to, solve this conundrum about whether or not to kill Chris, that was very compelling. That was very riveting. My only complaint about the scene is because Carl and Donut paid for their improvement to their personal space, they can now look at the social media feed and see what people are saying about them online, and they're able to track their views in real time. But when Carl's talking to Chris, the views start ticking up because people who are watching the show are aware about what's about to happen, and that gives Carl a bit of a heads up. So I feel like that may lead to some scenes losing a little bit of their spontaneity. But on the flip side, it reminds me a lot of when I was playing like Elder Scrolls when I was younger, or Fallout. And you're just walking through the world, exploring, and then you hear the boss music, but you haven't encountered the enemy yet. So now you're panicking. You're filled with anxieties. You're looking for the bosses. You're looking for the enemies because the music has changed. So maybe that type of thing will happen later in the book. So that was very interesting. And then they go up. They find a way to fly up to the last bit of the gnome island, and Carl and Donut fly up there, and it's just a suburban house. That's where the Gnome King is, and they knock on the door, and the Gnome King's the princess, the gnome daughter. She's like 5 or 6. She opens the door, and she's just like, "Hello, if you're looking for my dad, you just missed him. He died," and she's covered in blood. Very creepy. They go into the house. She's offering to make them lemonade. She's trying to organize some fundraiser because her pig to, pay for her pig's memorial service, her pet pig. And then as Donut and Carl are talking to this creepy girl who seems drugged out of her mind, the boss battle starts. And the boss is the little girl's pet goose. The goose that killed her father. The goose that makes all of Carl and Donut's magic disappear. This goose is invulnerable and cannot be attacked or damaged by anything from Carl or Donut. They eventually figure out that they can only hurt the goose with items from the house. And so they end up destroying the boss by putting its head into a garbage disposal and flipping the switch. Which is one of my worst fears, getting your hand stuck in that. But such a very funny, comical way to end a boss battle. And that just goes to show that even though Carl and Donut are so powerful, that the stakes will remain high for the rest of the series. Because when you play video games, there are some types of bosses, there are some puzzles, there are some enemies that are just so dangerous no matter how high a level you are. No matter how smart or experienced you are at the game mechanics. Because there are just some enemies you encounter in video games that make your build completely powerless. And Carl and Donut have just experienced that. So I'm excited to see the new dimensions that Matt Dinniman adds to the boss battles to this point moving forward. Because there's been a few boss battles up to this point where I was like, dang, Carl and Donut are going to easily beat this guy because they're just so powerful and Carl's so smart. And obviously there's plot armor. I know there's plot armor. I'm aware. But good conflict, good combat scenes are kind of what makes them good, is that there's always the chance that something can go wrong. And I had that feeling for this boss battle. And that was nice. They defeat the boss. Carl flies the house down, because now he can fly this house, like he can control the elevation. And Donut gets her merch, and she has this cat, and it's creepy, and she's over the moon. And now they're about to go into this meeting with the people that sponsored Donut and gave her this doll to try out. And that's going to be probably hilarious. I'm excited for it.
So, Carl just assassinated Loita. I did not see that coming. She did have a nice little villain monologue where she talks about how humans are a blight upon the universe and how they're so individualistic and their culture is poison, how they're poisoning the youth of her species, and how I can't wait till you're all gone. And then Carl, through gritted teeth, is like, okay, whatever, man. Goes into his interview to, talk positively about the toy donut. And then it explodes and kills Loita. And Carl gets away with it, even though the hooded figure interviews him and tempts Carl with a legendary box and says, yo, if you tell me how you assassinated her, tell me where you got your information from, we'll make it worth your while. And we also learn that Lucia Marr has killed 2 of the officials of the dungeon. So you can kill people in the dungeon who are in charge of the crawl without being instantly killed. And that's against what they told us in the first book. So there seems to be a revolution brewing. Perhaps Lucia Marr is not evil, or maybe she's just not completely evil because she's attacking the crawl itself. Kind of how Carl is attacking or rebelling against the crawl itself. Quite interesting. I can't wait to see what happens when Zev gets back. I know there's been a time jump. Carl and Donut supposedly were in stasis for 5 days while a court determined whether or not they should be destroyed. But yeah, even in the dungeon crawler Carl world, you can be too famous to be punished by the law. Well, something pretty weird has happened in the Gate of the Feral Gods. I'm listening to the book because the audiobook production is amazing, and I have an hour commute to work and back from work every day. And, Carl and Donut, they're catching up, and they're figuring out all the stuff that was happening while they were in stasis when they were in trial. And they're going to this castle, the sand or glass castle, and they're infiltrating it, and they're going to go defeat the boss. And as they're sneaking through, they encounter a sand wizard, and he's watching TV in a dirty room. He's basically an incel, and I think he's watching Inuyasha. So very good taste from this, incel wizard dude. And then they get some more information, and he's married to this ooze that's covered in sand. So he's married to this sand familiar. And how did he get to this castle? Well, he was catfished. He was catfished by someone masquerading as the goddess of lust. And what did he want from this goddess of lust? He wanted them to put the soul of one of his favorite fictional characters into his sex doll. Yeah. He wanted his sex doll brought to life, which is so very 2025. I think we'll be dealing with that in the near future. But that's not what I was anticipating to encounter in this book. I was not anticipating a chubby wizard incel trying to get life for his sex doll. And then they get another piece of the Gate of the Feral Gods trigger. So now they have 2 of the 3 pieces. We are about 66% through the story. And then after Carl and Donut get the piece of the Gate of the Feral Gods portal from this wizard, the castle gets destroyed by water, and Carl and Donut are in the underwater realm. And Donut flips out because she's terrified of water, like many cats are. And there's a little funny story about how Carl tried to give Donut a bath years ago and how she sent him to the emergency room because she butchered him. So funny. Donut did not like the water. They barely survive an encounter with some sharks, and they get some achievement and they survive, and then they get back to home base. And Carl, who put the head of the sex doll in his inventory, the head comes to life and it starts talking. So now he has this demigod that was pretending to be the god of lust. He has the head of this deity, and she's threatening Carl. And there's some ties from this storyline to the storyline that Carl and Donut got mixed up in book 2. So I'm excited to see how that plays out on the 6th floor. And now they just have this talking head of a sex mannequin, a sex doll, in their training room. So I wonder if there's going to be a rapport. I wonder if there's going to be a friendship that grows between Carl and the blessed sex doll head.
Sunday, I'm finishing the book today. I have about 21% of it, just over 120 pages, around that area. What has happened? Well, we had another boss battle. It was with a giant octo shark, or a sharktopus. No, it was octo shark because that's a dumber name, and the AI made a joke about it. The boss battles are a lot more compelling. Less linear, less straightforward, more Dark Souls-esque, more things you have to figure out on the fly. This boss battle is very interesting because there were some live commentators, and I relate to that. I often hear the commentators when I compete, and that's exciting, and adds an extra dimension. There was one guy that Carl and Donut were allied with. He used to be like this Ukrainian plastic surgeon who had a bunch of children and was in the tabloids, and we were possibly thinking that he was going to betray Carl, and he didn't, but he does die. So that I was thinking that was going to turn into something, but it did not. After Carl, Katya, and some other dude, Tran I think his name is, they defeat the Sharktopus, the Octo Shark. They are at the bottom of the ocean, and they have to use the Gate of the Feral Gods to survive. So Carl is worried about that, because if you open the Gate of the Feral Gods, some deity will sneak through. And that deity is probably going to be quite upset that they are in a place that they're not familiar with, and they're going to possibly destroy the world where you're presiding. Or even if they don't destroy the world, an elder god, a god that is more powerful, more humongous, more significant, will be upset that there's a feral god somewhere, and then they will come and destroy that feral god, or try to deal with that, and that will cause the world to possibly be destroyed. So I'm expecting some like eldritch horror, some Lovecraftian creepy god thing happening. And what do I get? The god's pet puppy. A giant intergalactic puppy that is so weak and brittle, but gigantic. About the size of the dome. So now Carl and Donut, they got to protect the puppy from being destroyed by mobs or lightning or the elements. And they gotta, save this puppy, because if the puppy dies, the giant eyeless elder god that is looking for his pet puppy, but he's blind, so he's having some trouble, is going to just go on this rampage and kill crawlers, not just in Carl and Donut's dome, but in the other domes. So time is of the essence. I was not expecting that. It is quite interesting. I'm really excited to see how the last 20% of the book goes. But yeah, this installment of the series has been a wild ride. Not quite as heartbreaking or as sad as the second and third installment. This one's a lot more fun as opposed to serious, even though some serious things are happening. Carl is starting his resistance. That's very compelling. But not a lot of serious things are happening. Oh, and Carl got an artifact from one of the previous owners of the Dungeon Anarchist cookbook, and we're getting a little bit more about his backstory. So Carl's feeling a sense of connection to his fellow anarchist brothers of the great past. So that's exciting. Carl's becoming more aware of his roots. We're getting some more backstory about the AI and how the system AIs develop and where they go after the crawl. All very compelling stuff. The AI is very interesting to me because the AI from the start of this series has favored Carl. And we're not quite sure why. Yes, it has something to do with Carl's feat, but also there's a sense that the AI stands in opposition to those that are in control of the crawl. And that's a very compelling dynamic because people, the people in charge of the crawl, they're trying to nerf the more powerful, the more successful crawlers. And they're trying to screw Carl over. They stopped Carl and Donut from getting a legendary box, which would have guaranteed that Carl and Donut would have survived until the later floors. And there's several times in this book, like an injunction has been filed against Carl and Donut to stop them from doing something that may make them overpowered, but the system AI is on their side. Yes, Carl and the system AI had a little bit of a spat earlier in the book, but the system AI is kind of working together with Carl. And I get the sense that the system AI is aware that Carl is trying to destroy the crawl. And maybe that's because system AI knows knows what happens to its predecessors, knows what's going to happen to it after the crawl. Maybe it's, having a little resistance of its own. But I'm really interested to see how the AI develops. The AI is definitely becoming a character of its own, and I really like that. I'm starting to think, because Lucia Marr is like being painted, she's being depicted as this crazy, terrifying, evil crawler. And I suspect that she's actually very similar to Carl. She's just this young child who is trying to overthrow the crawl. But the people that are in charge of the show, that are in charge of the broadcasting, are painting her in a negative light so that way other crawlers won't work together with her. And I think that if that is the case, if and when Carl and Lucia Marr meet, I think it's going to be fireworks. I think they're going to be a great alliance. That's what I'm hoping for. So about 120 to 130 pages, I'm going to finish my Watermelon, and we're going to finish Dungeon Crawler Book 4, The Gate of the Feral Gods.
Well, several hours later, what an amazing journey. What a great installment in the series. So many things surprised me. Louis getting into a relationship with Juicebox. So now we've got some crawler NPC romance going on. Carl has become the savior of the NPCs and the savior of the crawlers. He used the Gate of the Feral Gods to save hundreds and thousands of people. He ripped off the arm of the guy of wings that has been just stealing all the XP from all the other crawlers. That was a really cool scene. Carl uses the head of the sex doll mannequin goddess lady to vanquish another one of the gods that came through the portal. That was cool. Carl really impressed me in this story. He was so maniacal. He was so crazy. He was so intelligent. He schemed so well. And it's all with the help of the Dungeon Anarchist cookbook. He's been able to do so much, and people aren't quite sure how he's been accomplishing what he has accomplished. And then the epilogue, how one of the previous owners of the Anarchist cookbook is alive, and they are actually in charge of the pacifist group that is sponsoring Carl. That was so cool. I saw that coming. I knew one of the previous owners of the Anarchist cookbook was going to help him. I think we're going to encounter several more. I'm all here for it. I knew Katya was going to leave the party. Well, at least I predicted it. I did not know. I made a lot of predictions, both out loud and in my head about this book while I was reading it. I was wrong about most of it, but I was right that Katya could not remain in the party because Carl's genius with Katya's abilities is just so overpowered. So now she wants to go, take care of and save all the former followers of Hekla. That'll be compelling. So I don't think we'll see Katya in the next book. And that's a little sad. I'm honestly feeling a little bummed about that, but I think it's going to be very good for the story. Carl saved Chris by using some like phase thing, reaching out and pulling Maggie Mai out of his head. So Maggie is gone. Carl saved so many of the crawlers. He is the hero to several of the NPCs. It's really, really interesting stuff. And the epilogue was something special. Beatrice is alive. She is captured. And we're going to see her in the next installment or the installment after that. But when you're reading the first few installments of DCC, you keep anticipating running into Beatrice. And then you're worried that perhaps Donut's going to have a problem or a conundrum on her hands where she has to choose between Beatrice and Carl. And I'm not sure if that's going to be exactly the dynamic I was expecting. But Beatrice, she's going into the dungeon, and they're going to use her against Carl. Carl put a target on his back in the final passage, in the final part of the last chapter, where he's telling all the people that are going to be hunters on floor 6, come and find me. I promise I will destroy all of you. You will not break me. I will break all of you. And I got chills. This series is becoming so much more interesting, so much more philosophical, so much more engaging than I thought it was. It's more than just a fun read for me. I'm going to film some shorts about it tonight, so that way you guys will, be able to see shorts and then watch this spoiler-filled reading vlog if you'd like. But I might jump into the Butcher's Masquerade right away. I hope you guys don't mind me doing more spoiler-filled vlogs. I guess if this one just performs horribly, I won't do it. But tell me what you guys think about the spoiler vlogs. I feel like a lot of people do spoiler-free vlogs, and it's kind of hard to talk about a book without getting into spoilers, especially as you're reading the book at that moment. But I enjoyed filming this. I enjoyed getting back into the vlogging groove. I miss these. I miss just talking about whatever comes to my mind when I'm reading these books. And this was just a fun book to talk about because so much is happening. Oh, Carl found religion. That's going to lead to some issues, especially when we get to floor 12. He's now worshiping this fire god. And Carl has promised to destroy this fire god's brother. That's going to be difficult. If you look at the cover of The Gate of the Feral Gods, there's some little spoilers. You get some hints about what the book's going to be about. We have Carl and Donut jumping out of a biplane. Carl's wearing a bandana and a new jacket because he got those in his quest box. And there's this big old head from a giant with two mouths. One of the mouths has fire coming out of it. The eye sockets have no eyeballs in it. I wish I would have made some predictions about the book while looking at the cover at the beginning of the video, but next DCC vlog, I will be doing just that. But yeah, we had Carl ripping off a guy's arm. Odette doing some sketchy stuff in the epilogue. Carl found religion. Katya found her own place in the dungeon, and she's going to go her separate way. Carl saved Crocodile Dude. And, Maggie Mai's gone. And Chris has been reunited with the crew. I don't know what's going to happen. I think characters are going to start dying. And that's going to be sad. But I trust Matt Dinman fully. I can't wait to read the next, I think, 3 installments, maybe 4 installments three installments I have left in the series up to this point. I look forward to seeing what the stories have in store for me. What are you guys reading? Are you guys enjoying it? Leave it in the comments below. If there's any other popular series or popular books you think I should do spoiler reading vlogs about, let me know. Drop it in the comments below. I'm always interested in your guys' input. I'll talk to you guys next time.